Today we're going to go through a little speed build. This is a Fuji. It's coming in a box. This is what they call a box build. Most likely it's a single speed. We have no shifters. Probably has two brakes. We could spin backwards on this. So unbox it, put it together. Done? Maybe not. Still going to treat it like a tune-up. We're going to go through all the nuts and bolts, make sure things are tight, make sure the chain has good tension, make sure it's oiled, make sure the chain's not too tight, oil on the chain, wherever else we need it, and then making sure handlebars, the bearing headset is adjusted properly, not too loose, crankset's not loose, hubs in the wheels aren't loose, and make sure the wheels are straight. So just putting a hand on basically everything on the bike, and then taking it for a test drive. That's the last thing, most important. Always take it for a test drive or test ride, and then you can go and ride it. And don't forget, if you find this video helpful, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Find it really enjoyable, go ahead and subscribe. If you guys have any questions or you guys get stuck on something, feel free to shoot me a message, and I'd be happy to make a video for you. Most of these comes with either big giant staples or even glue, which makes it even tougher to rip this thing open. If you have to, you can use a razor blade, but don't go very deep. Just cut the sides right here. Get one side open, maybe another side, then you can lift it open. Be very careful with that. This one, just be real rough. Not rough, but aggressive. Box is pretty light. Watch out for staples, very sharp. Yeah. A little glue down there, nothing there. Get these flaps out of your way. Here we got the seat, very important. We're going to use this to put it in the bike repair stand. Go ahead and bend this box open. Here we got the bike right inside there. Bend that open, give you plenty of room. I'm going to go ahead and make sure the chain ring is on my side, so I have access to it when I put it on the repair stand. Grab somewhere where it's not going to harm the bike. You don't want to grab any cables. Don't cut yourself. Be very careful. This guy's pretty light. If you need help, get two people. We still got parts on the inside, and a part just fell back in, so before you start throwing garbage back in there, pull all your parts out. But I'm gonna use the box to put all the garbage back. So either you can disconnect, get that front wheel, which is zip tied to the bike, you can get that off first, or if the bike's light enough, you can bring it up all together and do it then. Bike's pretty light, so I'm gonna go ahead and put the seat post in. And just be careful if you are using a razor blade, make sure you're not cutting any of the material. You might have carbon, you might have a nice paint job. But looks like we do have a carbon seat post. I'm not sure what model this is, we'll figure it out. And probably got a box of pedals, possibly a skewer, reflectors, manual, plastic chain guard. I got a plastic bag. If you need to, you can leave the plastic bag on. If you're kind of messy and greasy, leave that on till to the very end. This particular bike has 2 bolts for the seat post clamp, so in most cases it's either a 4mm or a 5mm, some cases a 6. And then if you require, or you can put some lubrication, probably just a plain grease. If you find that your seat post is slipping down, even after tightening to the recommended torque spec, if it offers it. Just don't go too tight, use common sense when you're tightening. If you're still slipping, there's a carbon paste or some type of compound you can put. It's almost like a toothpaste that's going to grip it but not harm it or keep it from installing into the frame, and it's going to offer some extra grip. That way you don't have to over tighten your bolts and snap a bolt or snap your carbon. In this case, I'm just going to do a really thin coat of grease. I got a little grease brush. I'm just going to do one swipe here, and I'm just going to spread it around with my fingers. So thin that all you're going to notice is that it's shiny. If you need more, then the bike will let you know. And of course, get a nice new rag. If you need to, you can balance the bike between your legs or let it lean on you. Just don't let it fall the other direction. Get the seat post, the nose going forward, and if it doesn't slide open, go ahead and loosen up your bolts. And I'm going to leave my seat post high so I have plenty of room to grab on my clamp here, but just get enough to bite so the clamp can put some pressure on it. And there's a little bit of Loctite on these bolts, which is supposed to cause a little resistance as you're turning. It's doing its job. That way it doesn't vibrate loose on you as you're riding. So I'm just trying to go even. If you got more than one bolt, always cycle from one bolt to the other, tighten a little bit, go to the next one. It's still pretty light pressure right here. I'm probably going to do maybe like 5 Newton meters approximately. All right, so I'm going to give it a little pull. I'm going to hold the bike down, see if I can pull the seat post up. That's pretty good. I can't twist it because this is it's got a shape on it. It's an aerodynamic seat post. And most of these newer part tools, or most any repair center, has a little V cutout, so it's probably going to grasp this real nicely. It is carbon, so we're not going to squeeze very tight. I'm not going to try and move this in the frame in the repair stand too much. That's going to put more pressure on the seat post. But I'm going very gentle here. Very light, just not so light where it's going to fall. And then we can go ahead and get your wire cutters. I like to use those. They use a lot of zip ties and rubber bands. So I'm going to use wire cutters rather than cable housing cutters because they have a sharper end, or at least a point that helps me get in if the zip tie is a little too tight. Remember to hang onto your wheel so it doesn't fall and hit the ground. As you're taking stuff off, I like to throw it in the garbage. So we got one. Typically I have at least 3. And then just be careful not to scratch anything. And usually they intertwine the spokes into the crank arm, so just take your time, find the right angle, do a little bit of turning, but just gentle. Right now we got the handlebar connected to, so I'm going to snap this rubber band so I can move more free. Anytime you get stuck, just see what else is connected to you. All right, now the handlebar is free. And if it's still in your way, just get the handlebar out of there 100%. Remember, just take your time, do not scratch anything. Boom. Right there, and then here on the crank we have a little plastic bag with a couple washers. Those are your pedal washers. They leave them there connected to your crank arm to remind you. And from here we just go ahead and looking for more zip ties. Unclip all your zip ties. We got some styrofoam with tape. I'm just breaking it with my fingers. Whenever you can, break it with your fingers. That way you don't have to break a razor blade out, taking a chance of cutting or scratching paint. We got little end caps for the wheels. Look like little small pizza pies. You could always save that stuff. You could use it if you're going to pack a bike. That's where that stuff comes in good. And for the most part, it looks like all the zip ties are gone. For the fork, there's going to be a plastic piece that's sitting in the dropouts. Just give that little whack loose. That's just to protect the bottom of the fork, the dropouts, and then a lot of these covers will just slide right off the fork legs. Try and work tidy as you go, unless you don't care, then I don't care. If you are going to let this handlebar hang, just make sure it's not pulling too hard or creasing your cable. If it just hangs gently, it's a pretty light handlebar, so I think we're good. That's our brake cable housing. All right, so here we got your stem. This is what we call a threadless stem system, usually 1 1/8" at the top. This looks like it's equal on the head tube. So probably a 5mm Allen on the top. And this top cap, this top screw is holding onto your fork, so grab onto your fork before you unscrew this completely. There's no stem here to pinch your steer tube. So put a little grease on this top cap bolt. These two are an item, these come off together. Here we got a spacer that takes the width of your stem. And then you got your other spacers you can play with. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably a 10 millimeter, and then possibly a 2.5, but you can play with the height. Can't go any higher, but you can certainly go lower. Just put these spacers on top of your stem. Put your stem all the way down if you want to drop it all the way. If you like that, you don't want to put these spacers back. Hello, this is Arthur.
Hi, here, National. I'm here at the side of your house.
Okay, yeah, you're on the side?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, give me 2 minutes, I'll be right out to meet you. All right, installing handlebars, take 2. So, if you want to take a quick peek what's inside here, you do have this top piece right here. It's actually a spacer / dust cover. Underneath you got your bearing, you got your split wedge here that wedges into your bearing. Your bearing's sitting right there. So if we slide all that off, Got your bearing right here. You can pull that out. It has a beveled edge, so it fits perfectly into the beveled piece of your head tube. So that does have to match. Got some information on here. If not, then you're just you need to get that information if you have to replace these. But bearing at the bottom as well. So when this top screw comes in, it's attaching to your steer tube. There's a star nut inside here. So there's a screw inside here. So as you're tightening up your headset, everything's getting nice and tighter. It's pulling this up, making everything nice and compact, taking any of this jiggle or play out, but also not too tight. You also need your steering to move smoothly. So getting that back on. That's just a quick little intro there. I do got some other videos if you need to get into replacing, getting into your headset, troubleshooting, stuff like that. Boom. And then here's where your yoga comes in when you drop stuff and you're working by yourself. Can't let go of the fork. Put that back in there. And okay, got all our spacers, and that's our top cap nut that just fell. So I see we don't have a stem. Typically the stem is connected to the handlebar, which it is not. It's probably in the box, so I'm gonna go ahead and use this tire or a pedal strap, or you got some Velcro or a big huge rubber band. But I'm gonna use this to go ahead and tie the fork. So if you gotta take off or grab the phone, this guy will stay in place. Just be careful if it is the metal clamp doesn't scratch your paint. Boom. So go back to my box over here. See, we got a manual, bunch of goodies here. So yep, here's our stem right here. We even have a front brake, so that's a pleasant surprise. And a couple reflectors, a couple zip ties. And we got a special tag. So you have the option to flip this up or go upside down. This is 100 millimeters. It states on the side, 17 degrees. So it's a 17-degree rise, or it can be a 17-degree drop, just like that. And then we have 5 to 7 Newton meters. So it says 5 over here. So I'm tightening this face plate 5 Newton meters. And if I don't see anything else, I'm going to use the same Newton meter tightening for these guys back here. 5 to 7, so pick something in the middle. Use common sense as well. Sometimes your torque wrench may not be working properly. But can unscrew these guys. And these bolts should typically either have some grease or they should have some Loctite thread locker. I've seen them come both ways. It's up to you guys if you want to go into a forum and argue about it, which is better, or in some cases maybe you're using both. But I typically use grease. Does cut down on any potential squeaking, because it is a very high torque area. When you're standing up pedaling, you're using that handlebar to brace yourself. So if you do get any creaking in that area, check all your bolts. Thread locker is good to make sure that your bolts don't vibrate loose on you. So I mean, they both items do sound good, but always make sure the area is clean inside here, because we're just using friction, no grease at all. If you're still having slipping after meeting your torque wrench, your Newton meter recommendation, you could use something like it's like a fiber grip or something that's going to give you a little more grip inside there. So I'm going to put this in the up position. Typically, a lot of people don't really want to be slammed down. If you need to go back, they can always go back and flip this. You just got to take your handlebar off, flip this around. But we're going to go up. We're going more for comfort. So now that I'm going to go ahead and hang on to my fork. Push your fork up, make sure everything's seated properly. Sometimes the bearing will pop out of place, but you can easily put it back. Spinning good there. So I'm going to press up with my fork, push down on this guy, give it some turns and compressing so we get that nice and it feels good still. And then I'm going to go ahead and tighten up at least one pinch bolt for, and that guy wants to spin on me a little bit. And don't worry about straightness right now. Just get it remotely in the area. So now that guy's nice and tight. So now it's holding on to my fork. Now I can go and focus, put my handlebars back on. If you have any other cables, right now we just have one brake cable. If you had derailleur cables, make sure everything's routed where it's supposed to go. So you don't want everything spaghetti and twisted. You know, just set it there, take a look back, make sure everything's routed properly, everything's clean, nothing's getting hung up, getting twisted or caught on anything. So I'm just gonna hold that. And just get it roughly in the middle. I like to put one bolt in this faceplate, and now I can get started. As long as the handlebar is sitting flat and flush inside the stem. So I got that. Get it at least 1 or 2 revolutions, get that screw in there. Now it's holding. And then I'm gonna go on the opposite. I'm gonna go crisscross, go hit the other one. And you're keeping these bolts loose for now. Just keep that handlebar nice and flat. Keep the faceplate flat. And I'm doing a little wiggling and jiggling as I'm turning. That may help me find the hole. And we had a cable in the way. There we go. So don't get too rough until you take a really good look, see what's going on inside there before you get aggro. But I like to get all the bolts started. This goes for any component or any project. Get your bolts started with fingers. Get at least 1 revolution. Then you know you started the threads properly. Then you can go ahead and with your speed tool, or even if you're using power tools. Probably not recommended, but if you're a badass, you know what you're doing, then by all means. So right now, I'm just gonna put this roughly in the area that looks good, and I'm not too worried about centering right now. Centering, leveling, straightening, everything, we're gonna do that when the wheel's on and the bike's on the floor. But these bolts here, I'm tightening, doing a crisscross pattern, tightening each bolt a little bit at a time, and you wanna make sure that you still have a gap between your faceplate and your stem. A gap here, gap here, gap here, gap here. So that's 4 gaps. Make sure it's roughly the same. We don't want any pieces of metal touching. That could create a little bit of stress on the faceplate, and down the road it could cause fatiguing and cracking. So I'm just gonna tighten this enough to hold the bars in place. That's good. Now I can go back with my top cap. And here's my top cap bolt, putting a little bit of grease on there. When in doubt, go ahead and use those fingers. Fingers can do a cleaner job. I'm just getting grease in the threads, in between every thread. We're not using a lot of excess. A lot of excess just means potentially more mess, bigger mess. You're gonna get it all over you, all over the bike. A little dab will go 100 miles. And this particular bolt has a washer. This one fell off. Some washers are built on, they don't really come off. And then through our top cap, and then right through the top here. And if your top cap has wording, logos, go ahead and line that up wherever you feel makes you happy. So it doesn't matter if I tighten this top cap first for initial installment, or I do it second. Right now I'm just taking the loose play out. I'm not really worried about tightening anything. I'm just getting the looseness out. There we go. Cool. Cool beans. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the front wheel on. Oh, you're packing stuff off. Wow. If you find this hard to take off, just grab some pliers. This is just cheap plastic. So no quick release here. You can actually see the orange, that's your bearing that's pressed into the hub. And then unscrew that. Looks like it has a built-in washer. Make sure everything spins nice and smooth. You can grab the ends of the axle, kind of put pressure counterclockwise, or not counterclockwise, but making sure there's no wiggle jiggle, no side to side movement, everything spins well. If your tire's directional, make sure you see what rotation, this is completely bald here. No logos on the hub, so we're not worried about reading it from the front of the bike or seated on the bike. But I'm just holding that up, putting pressure. I'm gonna open this up a little bit more. And if you're having trouble getting this in, get your bolts completely out of the way. If you're still having issues, could be that the dropouts, the fork itself is messed up. Could have came bent, got damaged during shipping, or just never got manufactured correctly. So just tightening this, getting that snug with fingertips, that way the wheel stays in place. We'll straighten this out later. Now we can definitely tell our handlebars are crooked from the wheel. Not too worried about that right now. And pedals would be nice. All right, so this bike is a Fuji. It's probably higher end, so it may not be coming with pedals I'm used to working with some lower end entry-level bikes. They give you everything, but that's cool. You get to choose your own pedals. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that front brake on. I'm gonna straighten up this handlebar just because it's kind of bugging me, but you can certainly work without it. So we're just gonna loosen that a little bit, straighten this up, just eyeballing, snug that bolt back up, boom. And we'll go ahead and put this brake on. So this brake right here, usually it's gonna give you the nut, which can be very long or very short or very medium, and then they're giving you a washer. The washer has little serrated bumps on it, so that's going to grip onto the frame. So I take all that stuff off. We got a little blue thread locker here. That's just to keep the bolt from coming loose. Typically, I haven't had any issues just using thread locker here. So we're going to shove that through. It's going to come out this side over here. Actually, let's back up. Let's go ahead and put that washer on. Washer's going to go between the brake and the fork, and then that stud, it's not going to go all the way through the frame. That's where this long nut's going to go in, make contact. And if you were to buy a new brake, usually they give you like 3 different sizes. So this is typically going to use a 5mm, and we're just going to get this snug for now. And if you feel resistance while you're turning, that's the thread locker doing its job. It's meant to make that bolt tough to come unloose. So Newton motor torque setting, something like this. Be aware if it's a carbon fork, check with the manufacturer, but I'm gonna guess anywhere from 5 to 10 Newton meters. You want it tight enough where it can't move very easily, but if I needed to make an adjustment with this side to side, I could still make it budge. We just don't want it to move too easy. We can always go back to that. So everything looks good. Here we got our front cable ready to go. So I'm gonna make sure this cable is sticking out in front. Front brake cable typically is out in front of all the other cables. It's the first one you're gonna see. And it's just the cleanest. We're just going for a nice clean line. Doesn't have to be intertwined. Getting into some cosmetics so it visually looks good, but also the more you're intertwined like spaghetti, the more cable it's going to take, and it may not give you that slack that you need. So I'm going to go ahead and through the top, going through that barrel adjuster. Now I'm going to go ahead and unloosen my cable pinch bolt, usually another 5mm Allen. Don't take this screw off all the way, just loosen it up a little bit. You're going to go between the metal. There's a big thick metal washer, so I'm putting all this in at once, and it's going between the actual brake. Bring this down. Careful not to kink or bend your cable too much. Housing goes right inside to the adjusting barrel cap here. Now I can go ahead, I'm going to squeeze the 2 brake pads together against the rim, either doing it from the top or doing it from the bottom. So I'm going to squeeze and hold that. Pull on the cable just with the fingers, pretty snug. You don't need pliers or anything. Don't wrap it around your fingers. Don't cut your fingers off. We also want to make sure that the head of the cable is seated properly in the brake lever, which I kind of heard it click in. So once you pull, it will behave. Release it. It's not going to go anywhere. Go ahead and tighten up this nut, your cable pinch bolt. And this is going to be about approximately 5-6 Newton meters. And I do want it tight enough because I am going to squeeze the brake lever about 10 times as hard as I can to brake in the system. Breaking in means once I apply a lot of pressure, this cable housing is going to seat nice and tight into the brake. The ferrule cap that's on the housing is going to seat nice and tight to the housing, and so on the other side. So as long as the brake pads are remotely where they're supposed to be on the sidewall of the surface here, if they are crooked, go ahead and try and get them a little closer. You can just eyeball it. And then I'm going to go ahead and squeeze this brake lever about 10 times as hard as you can. And you're going to feel at the end of this 10 that there's going to be a lot more play. So that means we did our job. We're breaking it in rather than breaking it in as we're riding the bike. By the time you get to your destination, you probably have little to no brakes. So I lost track there, but we're going to say that's 10. So now we can go back. I can take a better look. I'm going to squeeze brake lever. I can look at my pads, see if they need to be adjusted. Are they tilted down? Are they too high? Are they too low? We're going to fix all that stuff. And then I'll be able to make one last adjustment, maybe take some more, pull some more cable tension and make this a little bit tighter. So usually I like to have the brake lever come in at least halfway, and then make contact with the rim, and then you have the other half to pull even tighter if you need to. So if you have a real emergency situation, here I'm coming to a nice stop, bringing it halfway, and then if I need to pull harder, touching that handlebar, that means I'm really laying on that thing. When someone pulls out in front of you, and you gotta hit that brake hard. So cool thing about having a repair stand, you can bring this up, make it more eye level. But before I get into final tightening here, I'm gonna bring that bike down to the ground, get this wheel tightened up, make sure it's nice and centered. Then I can go and fine tune my brake pads to my wheel. So I'm looking at my brake cable here. My brake cable is just kind of flopping around. Might be hard to see there. But it's supposed to have a place, it's all full housing. It's gonna attach to the top tube here. There's no attachments here. There's no braze-ons. There's no little hooks. I can put a zip tie through the frame and into the housing. So I'm gonna guess that these 3 zip ties they gave me are gonna be just for that. So it's kind of a rough look. It's just gonna go around the tube and around the housing. 1, 2, 3. Keep that housing in place from flopping around. So I don't see anything else. I mean, I'm not crazy about it. What's gonna happen here is your cable's gonna be here just fine. You might get a little bit of abrasion because it's gonna be vibrating coming up and down, and pretty soon your paint's all scratched up on the side. And leave it long enough, it will wear the paint down, go into the metal. So if this is the only case, maybe get some clear tape or some type of clear frame protector and just go ahead and put it around here, or put something on your housing itself to soften the blow. But so I'm going to put a zip tie here. And not going too tight for now. Just kind of spacing these out. Can always go back and fine tune the space. So we're going to keep this on the side, keep it in line all the way to the brake. And then back here at the brake itself, we want a little bit of a curve. We don't want a straight line. If there is a curve, we want to make it nice and smooth. So take whatever you need. That way it's not pulling on the housing and making it turn into a corner. We don't want to crease your housing if we can avoid it. And then usually I'll cut these off with a toenail clipper. Toenail clipper, because it's definitely got more strength. I can get really close. That way there's no sharp end left, because this is definitely an area where you're going to grab it, maybe put it on your shoulder or something. You're hopping on a train. No more sharp edges. Definitely don't like that surprise. And then the big square piece here, I'm going to go ahead and turn and shift this. And just is more cosmetic. Put it down on the bottom where nobody could see it. Just make it a little bit more of a cleaner look. Then you just stand back, go ahead and straighten up your line, make it nice and neat. So I'm going to go ahead and throw some of my own backup pedals on here, because I want to take it for a test ride. Test ride, super important. After you do any work, take it for a ride, cruise around your block. Be very careful, and then that way if there's something wrong you can fix it right on the spot, rather than giving this bike to somebody and they go for a ride, 50-mile ride or whatever, and pedal falls off or brakes are out of alignment, so there's a weird creaky sound. Let's take care of that stuff while we can, right after your build or adjustment. So some of these pedals are marked left and right, some are not. I'm just going to look, this one doesn't say anything. I'm going to look for my thread angle of the pedal. Right now it's going in this direction, so that means it's going to turn that direction. So this means it's going to be my left side, because the left side is usually opposite of what we're used to turning. And then FYI, this is a fixed gear, so it is on the fixed gear side. There's no free spin backwards, so definitely be careful. If you're turning this wheel, it's going to keep going forward and it's going to keep going backwards, so make sure your fingers doesn't get caught somewhere in here, gets caught here in the chain. It will keep going and it will chop or try to chop your finger off, so be really careful when you're working with fixed gear bikes. So we're saying this is the left side. So once I'm standing on the right side, which is the drive side, I'm going to go ahead and turn clockwise once I'm over here. And I know this can be a little confusing. It took me a while to really get this. So I'm turning clockwise, just getting that started by finger. And I know this one here, if I take a look at this one, if the thread pitch is hard to see, give it a turn, a quarter turn, until the thread pitch gets real noticeable. And this one's doing this, so it means I'm going to be turning this way, which means this is going clockwise and this is my right side. So stay on this side, everything will be clockwise. It's just when you're turning this one, you kind of got to flip your head around. If you walk over to the other side, you're going to be screwing in counterclockwise. But if you stay here on the right side of the bike, install both of them on the right side of the bike, everything's going to turn clockwise for tightening. So get those started, come back with my pedal wrench, and once I get this on, I'm going to pedal backwards, which means this crank arm, this pedal wrench is going to be turning everything clockwise, just like this. Boom. And then I'm going to go ahead, so that made contact, now I'm going to go ahead and cinch it up just a little bit more, pulling back on the wheel, pushing down on my pedal wrench. That's 1, 2, get those nice and snug. If it's just for a test, they don't need to be too snug, they don't need to be a finished torque. Same thing on this side, get that on there. Gonna rotate backwards, and the actual pedal wrench is gonna be tightening clockwise. Boom, made contact. Hold the wheel, pull the wheel back, push the wrench down, snug those up, good. Careful, don't hit your frame. Always be careful with your tools. Don't be in too much of a hurry and chip the paint on accident. So now we're pedaling forward, fixed gear, and pedal backwards, fixed gear. So keep fingers on your body, keep them away from the chain. That is a finger eater. Now I can take a look at everything else. I'm going to go ahead and look at the rear brake, looking pretty good. Brake pads are in pretty good alignment with the sidewall braking surface. All right, so once we got all our parts on, right now I can tell, obviously the saddle's a little high, we're not worried about that right now. Saddle is tilted going upward, the nose is going up, so we want that level with the ground. So this has to come down a little bit, so you're adjusting your seat post, your saddle appropriately. This one, some of these have a 2-bolt system, loosening one side, tightening the other, getting that tilt correct. Then we're also going to get our braking system correct. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to dial in our headset. I like to throw a leg over it, I can balance the bike, I get 2 hands free. And then, so we're going to go ahead and loosen up the pinch bolt, the one that grabs the actual fork. So there's 2 bolts back here, we're loosening that. So now my handlebars are loose. So that's good. Now we have a top cap up here. This top bolt right here is going to tighten or take any play out of your headset system, making it nice and snug, but not too tight. So we're definitely going by feel. So I'm putting that tool in there. I'm just using fingertips with my tool, taking that gentle slack out, and then it starts to get a little bit tight. And here's where you're going to be very gentle, put a little pressure, and then you're going to use that front brake. So you should have your front brake dialed in. Squeeze that front brake, you're going to rock the bike forwards and backwards just a little bit. Use 2 fingertips to move that bike back and forth. If your tires are slipping on the ground, you're pushing too hard, you just want a little jiggle. The more lighter and more sensitive you are, the better you're going to feel any looseness. So right now that feels pretty good. Also make that sure that your front wheel is tight, which I forgot to do. So we're going to tighten up those bolts, and then we're going to check the rear wheel as well. Even though it came from the factory tight, we're going to double check their work. So we're going to make sure this wheel is nice and centered. We don't want it moved over to the left or to the right. So holding the bike straight up and down just like this. I'm going to go ahead and loosen up these bolts. These should have been finger tight. Make sure that wheel's doing what it wants to do. It's going to find its own home. When in doubt, give it a couple taps on top. It's going to jar it loose, make it sit directly in the center of your fork. Finger tight, both bolts, and then go ahead and start tightening one side just a little bit, go to the other side, and just keep doing this until you reach your end torque setting. In the book, they might have something like anywhere from 30 to 50, something really huge, but if you feel comfortable, just go ahead and do. Definitely want them pretty snug. I'm going to feel some pressure, have that tool dig into your hand a little bit. So now that this wheel is nice and tight, we're going to check the rear. What I do is I get the tool in there. If I can get it to move just a hair, just a millimeter, I can kind of feel the pressure that I'm using and make sure that feels good to you. So nice and straight there. So I'm going to go back. Check that, hold that for brake, move that bike a little bit forwards and backwards, just very gently. If you can't see what I'm doing, you're not seeing the movement, that's a good thing. That's how little I'm moving it. So there's no play, there's no knock, there's no feel, there's no sound coming from that loose headset. I feel it's pretty tight. I'm going to lift the wheel off the ground a couple inches, turn that handlebar. The handlebars are moving separate from the wheel, just grab your brake or fork, move that left or right. You're just feeling for nice smoothness, no grittiness, no toughness, no scraping sounds. So that's good. Now I'm going to dial in, make sure that my handlebar is straight to my bar. I can tap that, lining up the center of my handlebar. And that's a good time to make sure your handlebar is centered in your stem, so side to sidewise. But if I'm looking at my stem, it should be okay. Stem to middle of tire, that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten that up. Again, that's going to do about 5 to 6 newton meters. Tighten up one a little bit. Go to the other side. Snap up the other one. Good time to bring out your torque wrench. If you want a torque wrench, you feel pretty good about your tightening skills, go ahead and do that. We can always do a safety test after, make sure we're not too loose. And now I'm going to go to my handlebar. I'm going to go ahead and loosen this up. I'm off a couple millimeters just to one side. So I'm loosening one bolt, seeing if it'll move. The handlebar will move if it doesn't. So I don't want to loosen too much. I don't want to lose my entire adjustment. I want to do just where I can start sliding it a little bit up and down, like right there. And you're just going to center. So now the handlebars are centered in the stem, side to sidewise. Now you got your height. You can tilt it up or tilt it down. Typically the drop bar area, you want it almost horizontal. It's tough to tell because there is a curvature, but just that look right there, we're in a pretty good spot. You're looking at your hoods here. A lot of times we spend a lot of time right here in the hoods. If you're too high, you're going to be up here. If you're too low, you're slanted down more. So find that happy medium. And then you're going to do your cross pattern, making sure that your faceplate has a gap between your actual stem. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 spots. So I'm tightening one top corner, going down to the lower opposite corner, and continue that. And if you need to, always get your eyeballs underneath. Make sure you still got 2 gaps over here. Get the gaps as close to equal on top and bottom as possible. And then again, definitely recommend using a torque wrench. And then just alternating your bolts. You're not going in a complete circle pattern. If you go in a cross or star pattern, you're going to distribute pressure equally rather than put it all on one side and then going to the opposite side and then tightening. So what you're doing is kind of creating a bend, and all the pressure is right in the middle of that either faceplate or whatever it is. It's almost like trying to snap a stick. We don't want to put all that pressure right in the middle. You want to put it on all equal sides or corners. So I feel I'm pretty close to 5. I checked out with the torque wrench later. You can also do a simple test depending on how much you weigh. You don't want to be too rough on this. I'm going to put a little weight pushing down. And then if you're brave, you can go ahead and try and balance for a second or two. Put all your weight on your arms or handlebar. So that didn't budge, so I'm pretty comfortable with that. So now we got straight bars. We have a nice tight headset. Get another feel, feels nice and smooth. Test that brake again. Right now there's no air in the tire, so that might be giving you a little bit of a false feel. So go ahead and put air in that tire if you need to. Now I can go back, check my brake pads, make sure those are aligned properly. Check tension on the cable, retighten that if you need to. And then, of course, we can check chain tension. It should be set from the factory. If not, then we got to do that as well. Chain tension, we're just grabbing this top piece for the bottom, and we're just kind of moving it up and down, seeing how much wiggle we have. If you stick a measuring tape on there, we're probably moving anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 inch, so that's pretty good there. That movement there is fine. If you had to tighten, for loosening these two. There's no tensioning devices on this thing. There's no screws on this area. They're like a chain tensioner. So all we're doing is pulling the wheel back and with one hand tightening each side, but also making sure the wheel's nice and straight, not hitting your frame on the top for your seat stay or your chain stay. And sometimes they come with a film of oil, could be just for shipping. Right now this one's pretty dry, so I'm going to go ahead and put some, I use Tri-Flow. And just rule of thumb, just let this stuff run out and hit each link. When in doubt, just shoot for the middle, let it drip out on its own. Do about 4-5 revolutions. And then we're just going to go back and wipe off any excess. And again, be very careful. This is a fixed gear. You don't want it rag to get caught in the gear. Drag your finger right in here and get it chopped or cut. So I'm going to go very loosely. If it grabs the rag, I'm just going to let it take the rag. So I'm going to go very slow. And going backwards, that feels pretty comfy. And again, about 4 or 5 revolutions will get you one wipe. So if you want to wipe it 2-3 times, you're going to do 4, 8, 12 turns. And I'm going to stop there. So I think we're pretty much dialed in. I just need air in the tires. Now I can go back and chop my excess brake cable here. I always save that for the last, just in case we got to pull that out. It's not going to be difficult to reinsert it with frayed cable ends. I'm going to use my cable housing cutter. I'm going to leave about approximately anywhere from 1.5 inches to 2 inches of excess length. Rule of thumb, just leave enough where you can definitely get your fingers back on it and pull tension. You don't want it so short you can't grab it with your fingers. There's no reason why you should be pulling your pliers out. And then I like to use wire cutters to put crimps in it. Get your cap. If it's a little unfrayed, go ahead and twist it cap clockwise. That'll make it okay. Put your cap on, twist clockwise to get it on there. Hold it, and go all the way to the base, the end that's closest to the cable. You're going to put 2 crimps right next to each other. Give it a tug. Make sure that cap stays on. Now I have something to grab next time I come back if I need to make an adjustment. But I'm going to go ahead and dial in my brake pads, get those aligned, maybe pull tension one more time, get a tighter brake lever feel, and then you're pretty much done. So other than that, I like to go through the rest of the bike, making sure all the bolts are tight, checking the rear brake that's attached to the frame, things like that. Crank sets, we got chainring bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got a bolt over here for the crank set. We're making sure that's tight, tightening up your saddle over here. Not too many parts here. We have no derailleurs, no shifting involved over here. Of course, making sure your wheels are nice and straight and true, which they should be from the factory, but hey, you never know. And then you can double check your stem tightness for, and then you got your shifters over here. These shifters can tilt in or tilt out. So what I do is I give them a little squeeze test pushing inward. You know, everyone's strength is a little different. I'm going to pull outward. If you get them to move, then we need to tighten them up. Find a specific bolt to tighten those guys up. Going to be underneath the hood. Other than that, you're going to get some air in the tires, take it for a spin, and go from there. You're all done.